to the channel, the podcast. If you're new, hi, my name is Becca. I have one leg and this is the Cripple Chronicles. It is my life basically in long content form, I don't know. But it's a bit embarrassing to be coming on here and doing an episode after saying, oh, I'm back, season 2 podcast, it's going to be back on it, like, don't worry. And then it just dipped off again, and that has definitely been a bit of a block coming to recording, because I'm like, well, I said I was going to do this stuff and then I didn't, so now I feel like I can't. I don't know if you get that, but that's what's basically going on in my brain, and I think I am maybe going to try and explain it a bit more in the next episode, because this week I have a plan and I'm set on doing it. So the plan is, because it is September, I'm recording this on the 25th of September, I'm not leaving myself a lot of time at all to get things sorted and edit it, because I want it out by the end of September, because September is Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month. I'm not sure if it is awareness or if it's just prevention and there's another month for suicide awareness. I've been thinking about it a lot this month, and there's different things that I wanted to kind of discuss on the podcast, with me struggling with my mental health and having suicidal ideation and things like that. Throughout this episode, there is going to be talk of mental illness, suicide, self-harm. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I don't want to age restrict this in any way. I'm just wanting to give a bit of a content warning, because mental illness can impact anybody at any age. I recently saw a 12-year-old boy that was diagnosed with autism and not getting any help had actually killed himself because he didn't see any way out, and it is impacting kids at a younger age now. So please don't age restrict me, Mr. YouTube, and I really need to go get a drink because my mouth is so dry, and I'll get into this episode. I probably should not have grabbed myself a fizzy drink there, because probably end up going to burp through this episode. But yes, let's get into my first little topic. Let me get my notes up so that I'm not getting lost. Mental health versus mental illness. Let's start with a distinction that I think is actually really important. Mental health and mental illness are not the same thing. Everybody has mental health, just like everybody has physical health. It is a state of our emotional and psychological, social well-being. It fluctuates depending on what's going on in life, stress, life events, changes in environment. These are all things that can impact mental health, just like eating right or exercising can affect our physical health. Here is where it gets a wee bit tricky. Just because someone has good mental health does not mean that there are blah 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 blah. Just because somebody has good mental health, it doesn't mean that they are never going to face struggle, because that's not realistic. There are struggles in life, and I think a really good saying that has stuck with me is, the same water that hardens the egg softens the potato, and I think it's a Russian saying, but it is basically that everybody experiences things differently and everybody has different tolerances to things. Mental illness is a different story. It refers to specific conditions that affect how we think, feel and behave. These aren't just occasional low mood or stress, they are ongoing symptoms that can deeply impact somebody's quality of life and their ability to function. These are conditions such as depression, anxiety, PTSD, schizophrenia, personality disorders. These are illnesses that need proper treatment and support, not just from family and friends, but from services as well. And that is something that I'm going to come on to cover in this episode, but I don't want to get too much into it, because I probably could rant on about it for hours, to be honest, because this is personal for me. I have been under mental health services for over 10 years now, and I know firsthand of the struggle it can be. I remember after admitting to my family that I was self-harming and getting taken to the doctor, and she looked at my cuts on my arm and said, nah, they're superficial, they'll heal up. I don't think you're depressed. You're too smart to be depressed. And I'm like, imagine hearing that, like somehow my intelligence as a shield against mental illness, somehow like me working in mental health was a shield against mental illness. It wasn't. Depression doesn't care about how smart you are. Mental illness isn't about weakness, and it definitely is not about being smart or not. It is influenced by so many factors: genetics, environments, life experiences, and it really is a mix of nature and nurture, because some things you can be more genetically predispositioned to if you have family members who have suffered with those mental health conditions, and then life experiences depending on how you have been brought up. If you have been brought up in a similar way where your parents had trauma and they were taught how to do that, then the cycle is repeating, and then you end up at more of a risk of developing these mental illnesses because of a mixture of genetics and life experiences. I think it is ACE, something about childhood experiences. I remember doing it in uni and I scored pretty highly on it, because there is a correlation with the amount of these experiences you have in childhood, how much more likely you are to suffer from mental distress. So it is a whole lot of things that can be going on, but what is I'm getting pure confused because Simba is scratching away and I've not put my phone on do not disturb, and I've got notifications coming through and I'm trying to stay focused on doing this. So what was it like for me with my journey and realisations after going to this doctor's appointment and basically being told I was too smart to be depressed? It wasn't just depression for me, it was complex PTSD, and despite being in and out of services for years, it wasn't around 2018, 2019 that PTSD was even mentioned, and I was told at that point that I wasn't ready to deal with it, and that stung. It was frustrating to feel like I was drowning and being told not yet. It took years, my accident that was highly traumatic, and a lot of time on my own for things to finally make sense. I understand when I was at therapy at that point, I had a lot of other outwardly things going on with my life at uni, with family, that were also heightening where I was at my mental health. It was bringing up active trauma symptoms, which I realise now that was spiralling me, and I wasn't ready to dive into that trauma there, but going to something and basically being told this is what's wrong with you, but you just need to suffer right now. It it why am I even meant to put that into words? Like, I was having panic attacks leaving the house, seeing vans, thinking I was going to get beat up, having nightmares. I was hardly sleeping. I felt so sick with anxiety, and how are you telling me that I'm not at a point to deal with it? How do I live a life like this? And I realise now it was time, and that is one of the hardest things to accept when you think time is running out, when you're in survival mode and you don't know if you're going to make it and you don't know how much time you've got. And it does feel terrifying, but having a lot of that time on my own gave me a chance to figure out what was going on in my brain and what was real to me and what had happened, and acknowledging the experiences that I had. It was in the moments where I was left alone in my recovery after my accident, and especially after my amputation, I had a lot of time to reflect, and it really was feeling like I was finally able to put some of the pieces together. Some of the stuff that had been missing for so long, my life up until that point, it taught me so much about the realities of mental illness. And even though I've seen an increase in people sharing their stories, I still feel like there is a lot of stigma and misunderstanding around mental illness. And I think people do think that it is easy to just ask for help, and they don't understand the layers of shame and fear that it comes with. For a little bit of an example, with me, reaching out to the crisis team is something that feels very difficult for me because I never feel like I'm at a bad enough mental state to be reaching out to the crisis team, to be taking time away from somebody else. And I think part of it as well was the unhelpful advice: go for a walk, take a bath, have a cup of tea. Those things aren't helpful to me. But knowing that I can say to somebody, that's not helpful right now, I don't want a cup of tea, I don't want a bath, I can't actually go out for a walk because I've only got one fucking leg, so that's not helpful. And sometimes it does come across as being annoyed or agitated, but I try to say it in a way of, these things aren't things that work for me, and I think I just need somebody to listen to me. I just need to get this out of my head. And you know what? I need to have it documented for the next time that I go to therapy that I've been struggling this much, because sometimes it feels fucking unbearable. I had to write a full script out the last time that I phoned the crisis team, and I even said to them, I feel like I'm not at a bad enough point, but I've been struggling for the last 3 days and thinking that I need to call somebody for help. And how much longer can I keep doing that before I do something or I lose control, or who knows? So I've started to do the hard things and reach out, and it is fucking difficult. Since I started university, I started being a lot more open about my mental health, mental illness, because I wanted people to know. I didn't want it to feel like it was a dark secret, especially going into working in mental health. I wanted to be authentic, and I think I want to talk a bit about the stigma around suicide, because it is where it gets really tough. There is, pardon me, there is so much judgment, shame, and misunderstanding around mental health and mental illness, especially when it comes to suicide. People hear the word suicide and the room goes quiet. I've had that experience myself. I stood up and told my family, well, I thought I would have killed myself when I got to 21. And I remember one of my friends saying to me, I was recording it and it went from really cute to really dark quick. And that's just what was on my mind at the time. I had mentioned it to family and I had drank a lot of alcohol that I probably shouldn't have, but I didn't stop there and I continued on drinking. And people didn't know what to do or what to say, and it is sometimes the case of being afraid that you say the wrong thing. So what's the alternative that people choose? And it's most of the time to say nothing at all. And I'm somebody that's stopped doing that. If somebody messages me and it feels heavy and I don't want to say the wrong thing and I don't know what to say, I respond and I say, I'm really sorry, but I don't know what to say, because that's better than being met with silence when you're in such a vulnerable position. And that silence is part of the problem. It makes people feel like they need to hide what they're going through, or they can't reach out for help because they'll be seen as weak or broken or beyond saving. And I've definitely felt like that. I've felt like a burden on my friends and family. I've felt like, especially after the accident, that their lives had changed because mine had changed, and how fucking unfair is that? And there was a lot of times where I said, I wish I died. I wish I died, and then it was just easier for everyone to move on from this and I didn't have to heal. And do you know what? Making that admission and saying it out loud, that wasn't a sign of weakness. It wasn't giving up like I thought it was. The same as when it came to amputation. The first time when I considered it, it really felt like giving up. And then when I got my leg amputated, I realised I was doing the best possible thing for myself. And at that point, when I was in the aftermath of my accident and having those thoughts and saying it out loud, as much as it felt terrifying and I would cry every time I said it, it was a sign to people that I was in insane emotional pain. When I woke up from my accident, I was asking for mental health support, and I only started it at the start of 2024. 4 years after I had my accident. Is that really good enough? Because at that time, I was clawing out to everybody around me, having the lights off, shutting myself away. And at the time, the staff were telling me that I was dealing with this in the best way possible. What is the best way to possibly deal with when your life has been absolutely smashed to fuck, along with both of your legs, and you might never walk again? Like, how do you process that all in your brain without it feeling like it's just a huge, massive ball of shit? And I just needed somebody to listen and tell me that I wasn't on my own. And I have a lot of people around me now that do that, and when I reach out, I know they're there, and I think that is a big thing that keeps me going, because I need support. And I used to feel really fucking bad for that. I used to feel guilty that I needed support of other people. But that's life. We're not meant to do it on our own. We're meant to have support. We're meant to have people around us to lift us up and hold our hand when it's really fucking tough. And sometimes they might not know what to say, but they're there, and that's what matters. That showing up, I think, is one of the most important things that you can do for someone that is struggling, because they need to know that there is a way out and it's not ending their life. We need to be able to break the silence around suicide so people do feel safe talking about it, because not talking about it means that the stigma continues. And I think even talking on that, I don't know, like I said at the start of this, I don't know if this video is going to get age restricted because of me talking about suicide, but suicide can impact anybody at any age. Mental illness can impact anybody at any age. And if there was somebody that was struggling and needed to know that they weren't alone, then I would rather them sit and watch this for fucking 20 minutes, however long it ends up being, to listen to me ramble on. And maybe they don't even want to, but I'd rather that resource was there to know that it is okay to talk to people about it. It is okay to talk out. And even when I was in uni, I was sitting on Facebook typing my wee posts, and I did actually think about doing a TED talk about mental illness and my struggles, and I shut out of it. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do any form of public speaking. So to be sitting here years later in the midst of struggling and recording myself and being honest about it, yeah, it's fucking terrifying. I've been putting it off, but it's now getting to the end of September, and I really, really wanted to put some kind of content out there about suicide awareness, suicide prevention, and this probably is a bit of a ramble on because I keep going off script of my notes, but I have so many different thoughts that come into my head because that's just how my brain works. And yeah, sometimes it is frustrating not being able to stay on task or getting distracted easily or forgetting about things, but it's me, and I've realised that it's happened all throughout my life, and it's something that I can work with, but I can't change it because that's not how it works. Anyway, back to the actual topic. I'm going to have another drink because my mouth is getting dry. Oh, that was probably not a very nice noise. So moving on from talking about the stigma around suicide, I wanted to bring a bit of understanding to suicidal ideation. Suicidal ideation is basically when someone is having thoughts about ending their life, and it can show up in two main ways, and that is either passive or active. Passive suicidal ideation is when somebody thinks, I wouldn't mind if I didn't wake up tomorrow. They don't necessarily want to die, but they also don't have the will to keep going. It is like this deep sense of emptiness or feeling extremely overwhelmed. And from the outside, somebody might seem like they are being withdrawn. Maybe they're making comments about being tired or exhausting, or life feeling like they don't belong. But inside, it does just feel like this constant weight. No matter what you do, it's there, and it just feels like life isn't quite worth it. And I would say this is the type of suicidal ideation that I experience the most. It is just wanting a break, wanting to sleep all day, wanting to be put into a coma and not deal with life, wanting to float up to space and be disconnected from my body and not be in pain and just feel light. Get rid of that heavy pain that is weighing me down, but I can't do that. And the other form of suicidal ideation is active suicidal ideation, and this is more serious. This is when somebody not only has thoughts of ending their life, but they are also starting to make a plan. They might decide how they're going to do it, when and where, and you might notice them acting differently, maybe giving away possessions that they are really fond of. That is something that is usually a big warning sign for people when they start giving things away, because I don't need them, I won't need them anymore, and that should be a warning sign. The other things are saying goodbye to people, and I think this is something that sticks out to me. One of the last times that I was actively suicidal, before I had my accident, the reason that my friends knew that there was something wrong with me is because I said goodbye to them, because I couldn't end my life without saying anything. And yeah, that was a scream for help at that time, because my hands were shaking. I had popped all of my medication out, but I was trying to roll a joint because I knew that I had to smoke something to calm myself down to be able to take the tablets. And that is not an easy thing to do. It felt like life was too much, that there needed to be some kind of escape. And the last time I felt actively suicidal was in around 2021, when I had my frame on and I was on heavy duty meds, and I just got a reorder, and it was one night where I just thought, what is so bad if I just take these and I don't wake up tomorrow? But the things that I thought in my head is, well, who are going to be the people that find me? And I couldn't go through with that. I couldn't think about somebody finding me, and the emotions of friends that had lost me. It felt too much to go through with it, but it was a good few hours that I had to convince myself not to do it. Both passive and active suicidal ideation are serious. Just because somebody isn't actively planning to end their life, it doesn't mean they're not struggling. It is still a cry for help, even if it doesn't look like one, because passive suicidal ideation can very quickly turn into active suicidal ideation. So if there's any of your friends that are acting different to how they usually are and they're talking about dying a lot or not feeling important, there should be alarm bells going off in your head. And sometimes you don't know what to do to help, but trying to get them out of the house, and if they don't want to get out of the house, go to their house. They might be embarrassed because it's dirty, because it's a depression mess. Help them clean it up without shame or embarrassment by saying, sometimes my room looks like this. I've got to this point before and I know what it's like, and you're not alone, because that can be such a massive thing for somebody that is struggling. So what leads to these thoughts of passive or active suicidal ideation? There are many triggers and risk factors that can contribute to it. One big factor is trauma, whether it is abuse, neglect, losing a loved one, grief. Trauma can leave emotional scars that it then feels like it is extremely hard to cope with the world, and kind of going back to talking about that active suicidal feeling, like just feeling extremely heavy. And then there is also chronic illness and disability, which is something that I personally understand. Sometimes, like I said, wanting to float away and not be in my body and not feel pain. There is, like, I'm so used to living with pain in my body that I am able to dull it down, but on a daily basis, on the normal pain chart, 1 to 10, I sit at a 3. And that is like in my back and my shoulders, the jolts I get through my stump. And sometimes I do just want a break. I don't want to have to feel like this is so heavy. I don't want to feel like I am a burden on other people and always needing help. But you know what? I'm fucking disabled, and that means that I need help, and I am okay with that. I'm not a burden for needing help for something that was not my fault that fucking happened. I've got one leg, and to be honest, I should be dead, so I'll take what I can get. And it's taken me a long time to get here, because when I had the frame on for those 2.5 years, when people call me brave, that was a time that I was the bravest. That was a time where I had all of the time to myself. I was growing pieces of bone. I was going through surgeries. It was fucking a global pandemic. And yeah, at times I did really fucking want to die. I really did not want to be here anymore, because there was just such a sense of hopelessness. I didn't know when I was going to get out of this rut. And at that time, it was suggested to me about being on antidepressants, and I think people would have probably at that time seen me as somebody that is very against medication. However, I've tried medication in the past and it didn't really work for me, and kind of what I'm going to go on to talk about in one of the next episodes is the impact that medication has been having on me, and just a bit of a discussion about mental health medication, because I do think it's something that there is still a lot of stigma around, and an idea that if you take a medicine for your mental health, you are somehow weak or less than. But if somebody injures themselves physically, you tell them to take pain meds, and I see it in the same way. Sometimes it is up and down. Mental health is not linear. There is good times and there's sometimes really shit times. And yeah, you might not have to be on medication your whole life, but I think there will be periods where you need a bit of help, and that's something that really took me a while to accept and get onto that part of working through that, because I didn't want to just be fobbed off with medication and not given any kind of talking therapy, because medication wasn't going to just sort out the trauma in my brain. I know I've got off brain chemicals and sometimes I need a bit of help with that, but a lot of the other stuff that I'm doing is about giving compassion to myself, and that's really fucking difficult because I never really thought that I was deserving of compassion. Anyway, back onto the common triggers and risk factors around suicidal ideation. So that was about chronic illness, disability. There is also social and economic stresses, unemployment, homelessness, toxic relationships, um, abuse. These things can kind of build up over time, and it can feel like there is just one thing on top of the other, and a lot of the time it feels like there is one thing, that the straw that broke the camel's back, and it just feels like everything spins out and it is no longer manageable. And before I get too distracted and go off on another tangent, can't forget about intersectionality, people with overlapping identities like being LGBTQ plus or a part of a marginalised group facing even more challenges, being vulnerable because they are dealing with multiple layers of discrimination and exclusion, and this can then obviously be a risk to an increase of suicidal thoughts. If you've watched the podcast before, you'll know that I love statistics, so I looked into some kind of statistics around mental health, mental illness, suicide, and I kind of came across the role of GPs, general practitioners in suicide prevention. And there is a stat that might surprise you. Around 80% of people who die by suicide have seen their GP within the year before their death, and only 25 to 30% of people had been seen by a mental health specialist. This means that GPs, our regular doctors, are in a very unique position to notice the signs, pardon me again, of suicidal ideation and step in to help. But the sad thing is that often these signs are missed. In the UK, it is seen that Scotland has the highest rate of suicide, with around 13.9 deaths per 100,000 people in 2022. That is higher than the rates in Northern Ireland, England and Wales. So if more GPs could be equipped with the tools and training to recognise warning signs, it could potentially lower those numbers. Most people visit their GP regularly, so that is a key point where intervention could happen. And I did actually have quite a good experience with my GP this morning discussing medication. The last GP I spoke to was very unhelpful, and I felt like I was the one calling the shots and telling him how to do his job, and that makes me very uncomfortable. Although I worked in mental health, I don't have the training that a doctor has. They go to years of university, and I never want to feel like I'm overstepping. So anyway, like I said, I'm going to discuss this more, but the appointment I had with the GP today, she was asking about my mental health, the support. She was very compassionate. She had a lot of empathy. She kind of directed me on what to do about my medication and gave me ideas of different stuff that I could try, and was very informative about the information that she gave me, and then also booking in an appointment in 6 weeks' time to check in with me when I've come off meds and on other meds. How am I doing? Because I'd said, I've put all of that in my diary so that I don't forget when I'm supposed to be changing over things. So she said, look, I'll call you on this date, and this means that we are sorted and we can have a check-in and I can see how you're doing and then see if it needs increased or taken down. And that was really nice, because the last doctor I saw really tried to fob me off to the mental health team, and I was like, I've already spoke to my mental health practitioner and they told me to deal with it through the GP, because guess what, getting seen by a psychiatrist is highly unlikely, because I'll have to try other meds through the GPs and then I'll have to sit in a waiting list, and the likelihood of me getting seen by a psychiatrist is pretty low. So please help me, thank you. And I have been getting some help, so that's nice. I'm hoping that that kind of continues in other areas of my healthcare. But again, that's a discussion for next week, because this week our focus is suicidal ideation and mental illness. And I'm actually quite surprised that I'm 38 minutes into recording here, because I feel like I've just waffled on, and I've missed recording. I have, realistically, and it's just everything else that goes into it: the research, the notes, the recording, the editing, captioning, posting, clipping it down. All of these things go into it, and it just feels like sometimes that list is too big and my task paralysis is up here and I just can't do anything. I think a few days ago I had so much that I wanted to get done. I was awake at like 10 o'clock and I didn't start my day really until 4:30, because I was just sitting thinking about all of the things I could do and had zero ability to actually move and do them, and it was so frustrating that I just wanted to scream. Anyway, back to suicidal ideation. I want to touch a bit on coping with suicidal ideation. For me, it's been a journey of finding reasons to keep going, even when things feel impossible. Some days it is the smallest of things that keeps me here, like this podcast, chatting away. Like I've just said, like I've missed this so much. And I mean, I've got 50 subscribers, and in the world of billions of people, 50 people isn't a lot. But if I was in a room and had 50 people standing in front of me, I'd be shitting myself. That is a lot of people. And knowing that there are people out there that are cheering me on from the sidelines when I haven't even been able to see them, that has been such a huge comfort for me. I have had quite a few messages saying about following my journey and my recovery, and it does touch me. Like, even kind of, I've had one person reach out to the email crippledchroniclespod@gmail.com, and they thanked me for being so open about my mental health when having the frame on, because it is really fucking difficult, and sometimes there's not a lot of information out of there. And there are some days that are really bad days when it feels like a switch flips and the world feels too heavy to carry. And for me, like I'd said earlier, those moments of active suicidal ideation have always been the last straw. Like, everything building up to a point, hit after hit, until I reach breaking point. Like I'd said, the last time that I really got to that point was in 2021, and I was sick of my life being on hold, seeing everyone around me out there enjoying life, and I was stuck. And that switch flipped, and suddenly I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep going. I didn't know if I wanted to wake up again, and that is a really scary place to be in sometimes, because I know now that I have the ability to have a really fucking beautiful life, but there are going to be some days where that switch flicks, and I need to remember the small things that keep me going. So, what are the signs and symptoms of suicidal ideation? Before I wrap it up for today, I want to talk about the signs and symptoms of suicidal ideation, because I think it is really important. A lot of the time people assume that someone who is struggling will always show it, but that is not always the case. How many times has somebody been so seemingly happy and vibrant, and suddenly they're gone because they can't take life anymore, and everyone around them is left shocked and wondering what went wrong? The truth is, people who are struggling with suicidal thoughts don't always appear sad or withdrawn. In fact, most might even go out of their way to pretend that they're fine, even cheerful, because they don't want to burden others with what they're going through. And this is why it is so crucial to look for subtle signs. Some common signs can include things like talking about feeling hopeless, like they have no reason to live, saying they feel like a burden to others or that they're trapped in a situation that they can't escape, that they see no way out of, withdrawing from friends, family, or activities that they used to enjoy. Sudden mood swings. Someone might go from deeply depressed to seeming unusually calm and happy, which is usually a red flag, which can usually be a red flag. And like I mentioned earlier on, giving away personal possessions or saying goodbyes that feel a bit too final and don't feel like the norm in your relationship. Remember, these signs aren't always obvious, and sometimes the people we least expect it are the ones who are struggling the most. And it is normal to ask, "Are you okay?" and really listen to the answer. You're not just asking it because it's a social conversation to get to talk about you. And I don't know if that sounds a bit bitchy, but like, that's just being blunt about it. I think sometimes in conversations, some people, "Oh, how are you?" And I say, "Oh, for the purpose of the conversation, I'm fine." Because I know that it's not really about actually asking how I am, it's just to go through the formalities of the small talk so they can actually get to what they want to talk about. Finally, this is where I am going to wrap it up for today. If you are in the UK and you are struggling, here are some helplines you can reach out to. Samaritans is available 24/7 on 116 123. You can text shout SHOUT to 85258 or reach out to Mind at 0300 102 1234. There is also the National Suicide Helpline. There is also the National Suicide Prevention Helpline UK at 0800 689 5652. You can also now call 111 as they provide mental health support, and you can phone 111 and ask for a welfare check if there is somebody that you feel is unsafe. If it is an emergency and you think that somebody is actively suicidal, please phone 999 and get in contact with the police. I know it's hard and life can feel really unbearable at times, but you don't have to do it alone. There are people out there who care and who understand. Please reach out, because I know that it sounds cliche, but your life really does matter. Every day should be about suicide prevention, not just for yourself, but also for the people that you love. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Cripple Chronicles. Look after yourself, have a good week or month, and hopefully I'll see you soon.